On a cold winter's night, with the storm at its height, the lifeboat answered the call. They pitched and they tossed, till they thought they were lost, as we watched from the harbour wall. Though the night was pitch black, there was no turning back, for someone was waiting out there. And each volunteer had to live with his fear, as they joined in a silent prayer. And carry us home, home, home from the sea, angels of mercy.
Tonight there's a call out.
The first intimation is usually a phone call from the Coast Guard at Crosby, that's near Liverpool, asking me to authorise the launch of one or other of my lifeboats, or both. In this case we have an all-weather lifeboat, a Tyne class, and also a D-class inshore lifeboat. The Tyne class range is 50 miles offshore, and she can stay at sea for anything up to 20 hours. So obviously long-scale searches are sometimes called for. The inshore lifeboat is used literally as it says, inshore. A lot of our jobs are wildfowlers on the marshes, small children on their beds being swept off beaches, and this sort of thing. If I'm not near a phone, I will be bleeped if I don't answer the phone immediately. I will then accept the launch and dial a series of numbers into the telephone system, which will set the crew's bleepers off. There are different signals for inshore lifeboat crews to offshore lifeboat crew, because obviously we only need 3 people for the inshore lifeboat and a launcher, or 2 launchers preferably, whereas for the large boat we again need 2 or 3 launchers, but we need at least 7 crewmen. The crew make their way to the boathouse. I get the full details from Coast Guard, location, latitude, longitude, whatever possible, if it's a search area, how long, what we're looking for. I then proceed to the boathouse, by which time the crew are ready to launch. I pass the information to the coxswain, and from then on the job is up to him. I do not interfere in any way in the running of the boat unless I thought that any action they were taking would lead them into immediate danger. I have no direct radio communication with the lifeboat once she's at sea. I would have to ask the Coast Guard to talk to them. Our major concern on the launching side here is to get the crew aboard as safely and as dry as possible. The boat is moored afloat in the middle of a very exposed estuary, I believe with the most exposed lifeboat station amongst the 266 in the RNLI fleet. A rubber boat is used to get the crew aboard, which has a 40 horsepower outboard. The boat is either launched off the fisherman's jetty or off the open beach, depending on the state of the tide. A Land Rover is used as a towing vehicle. Once the crew are aboard, they leave the boarding boat on the mooring and proceed to sea in the big lifeboat.
What's the exercise tonight then?
We go out every other Thursday.
Yeah.
One Thursday we spend at the boathouse, the next Thursday we spend out here. We haven't ready for a long run yet, so we'll probably take for a run tonight.
I picked the right night twice over there.
Yeah. What we normally do is we just go outside, we do the anchor, and we go look for all the gear. Practice man overboard. Tonight we'll just go for a run off the blackboard.
They are ready to return, and when the job is over, the launching side will be in communication on their own specific radio channel, and they will be told how much fuel is required. They've then got to arrange to either fill the tanker up if it's not already. We have our own fuel tanker, an old Bedford, and this is to be taken to either the jetty up the Lytham Dock Creek if the boat can get in there, or if it is a low tide situation, the boat will be refueled on the beach.
In those days it was the maroons that went up, and a tremendous sound it was. Nowadays we only use the hand maroons because there was so much damage being caused when the maroons fell to earth. But the sound is incredible. I think you feel it in the chest first, and then you hear the sound. So your body's already alerted to it, and then you hear the sound, which is confirmation. And for the offshore boats, there are 2 maroons that go up. The first one you sort of puts you in your tracks, and you really don't know what to do. Particularly as a new member of crew, you don't know, am I supposed to turn out? The second one went, and there was no more thinking. I jumped in the car and drove down to the lifeboat station, ran into the crew room, and asked the coxswain, have you got room for me? Can I help? And Arthur Wignall says, "Oh, aye." He says, "Aye, come on, aye, get some gear on, lad. Aye, well, yeah, great." Wow, I just couldn't believe it. I was there. I was on my way.
You said that Lytham's one of the most exposed stations around the coast. Do you want to just describe what you're looking out at?
Yeah, the looking seaward from the boathouse, you can see that the river is a river estuary, and it's actually 8 miles across, but the main channel, which runs down sort of on the north side of the estuary, is itself about a quarter of a mile wide. All goes well until you approach the end of the river, the seaward end, when it used to be straightened out artificially when the port of Preston was opened, but that's now silted up, and the river has gone back to its old natural course, so it sort of takes a sharp dive to the left between the old training walls, as they're called, which are just dump rock, and then makes a rather tortuous course through a series of sandbanks to come out at the back of Salters Bank, almost parallel to the old channel. The crew themselves have put some of their own buoys down, and the boat is generally steered on a series of courses which have already been worked out on the radar and Decker, and these are checked once a month to ensure that the depth of water is still accurate, the water is still available on those settings.
The lifeboat here at Lytham was the Clifton in 1851. In 1852 it went out on a practice and hit a sandbar at the entrance of the river and overturned. Not being deep enough, it didn't self-ride, and 8 out of the 10 of the crew drowned. Well, you'll appreciate that this was only a small fishing village, and 8 out of 10 working men was a great loss. The first motor lifeboat was the GHW, which came in 1931 and was fitted with a small 35 horsepower petrol engine. They still retain the sails, so that in fact it was just an assistance. It kind of replaced the oars. In 1939 the new lifeboat came, called the Dunleary, which had 2 petrol engines in, so that was an increase that meant that it had 2 propellers, which increased the manoeuvrability of lifeboats, because you could put one ahead and one astern. And behind you on the Dunleary you have a montage of George Harrison, BEM, who was one of the longest serving motor mechanics in the RNLI institution. Wasn't the longest serving member all told, but the longest serving mechanic. And unfortunately poor old George died in 1991. But his first initiation on the Dunleary was as a mechanic, and he went to the wreck of the Charles Livingstone off Southport, and They'd been out on a service that day, and they went alongside the Charles Livingstone, which was a boat used to train river pilots from Liverpool, and they found out it had gone aground. The men on the captain on the Charles Livingstone said, "We're all right, the tide will go out, and tomorrow's tide we'll be able to refloat and we're all right." So Lytham Lifeboat returned to station. But during the night, the gale increased, and the Charles Livingstone could not get off the banks because of the heavy pounding, and she filled with water. And the Lytham and Blackpool lifeboats were then called out again to her. But in the meantime, 22 young trainee river pilots had been washed off the rigging and were drowned. For that, George got a bronze medal. After the Dunleary came the Sarah Townsend Porritt. The Sarah Townsend Porritt was a new Watson-type lifeboat to Lytham, and was dedicated in 1951. It was used at Lytham up to 1978, because the life of a normal afloat station lifeboat is 25 years. After the Sarah Townsend Porritt, we had a second-hand lifeboat, but no less a worthy boat, the City of Bradford 3, which came from Spurn Point. Coxswain Bevan is the coxswain at Spurn Point, a man of many talents, and the only lifeboat man to win 3 medals in 1 year: gold, silver and a bronze. She continued to do good service here, but then was exchanged for one from Baltimore, Southern Ireland, which was the Robert. The Robert came here for several years, and then they decided that they would evaluate a new Tyne class, which of course is a much faster boat, an 18-knot boat, as opposed to the old Watsons, which could not at any time do more than 9 knots.
What sort of a tidal flow have you got here when she's got to go out against the tide?
The peak tidal flow on a spring tide, that is a big tide, the rise and fall can anything be like 30 feet, can be anything up to 6 knots. So that a 9-knot boat going against it is only making 3 knots over the ground. But with the new Tyne, of course, at 18 knots, can get over the ground, of course. And this is the institution's idea, that or decrease the time taken by all lifeboats to get to a casualty. And let's put it, if you're a casualty in cold water, 5 minutes seems like hours.
You see, in the old days, the pulling and sailing lifeboats and sailing ships, as we had here, many wrecks, ships outward bound from Liverpool for the Americas, being embayed and driven onto the banks of here. And then you had the real classic dramatic Victorian rescues of people lashed in the rigging, and the early accounts are very dramatic. Mark, you might go 2 or 3 years and nothing at all, and you might have 2 or 3 wrecks a year, but my word, when they did take place, they could be very dramatic. Can you give me any kind of a flavour of the way that would have happened, going from the old boathouse? What would have happened, and how the pulling boats, for instance, might have gone out to a wreck like that? Well, of course, this station, the boat was launched off a carriage from the old lifeboat house, drawn by 8 horses, I think it would be, provided by the local stables, Towler's stables. And to get an offing sometimes, on occasion, they towed this lifeboat on its carriage, I think it was to South Shore, Blackpool, before they could launch off to get an offing to get across the banks of this wreck, because it was a foul tide and a gale of wind, and she could never have got near. So they got down there to get an offing, and then launched. I think it was about 5 miles they went, and effected a rescue. And otherwise, they proceeded under sail. They paid great importance to sail here, and all our boats in those days were non-self-righting sailing boats, sort of a yawl type luxury rig. And with a fair wind, they could make pretty good progress. Now the other thing was, if available, as it sometimes was, one of the Preston tugs. This is when the Port of Preston was really in its beginnings, and they had one or two tugs, paddle tugs, and they would give the lifeboat a tow, again to get an offing, if the tug could get far enough out to sea, depending on the weather, And look, one or two rescues were done by using a tug to get an offing. In those days, there was also a lifeboat at St Anne's, and there was a great rivalry between the two stations, as a matter of fact. And sometimes you would have an exciting race developing between these two crews. On one famous occasion, Lytham launched, and St Anne's in the meantime had launched, and Lytham got there first, and St Anne's arrived, and an altercation took place. Bugger off, this is our bloody wreck, you see. And the story goes that they sort of settled the matter with boat hooks. I don't quite believe all of this, but there's a bit of rough stuff went on. And I think the St Anne's in the end managed to claim it was their wreck. But I don't think any of that happens these days.
More or less panorama of the river from Preston Dock on the right hand side, coming down to the entrance of the river, Nelson Buoy at the entrance, which was the entrance river mark. It was a buoy. It's now standing in the front of Preston Docks, the new complex there. There were light ships unmanned with a bell on. Coming in from seaward, you would pick that up, and then you would pick the various buoys up as you're coming along. One would be Salter's Bank Buoy, where the river was very narrow. Then you would come along to what is known as Peach Light, which was a wooden tower structure which was put up to replace the lighthouse, which was off the end of Lightburn Avenue at St Anne's, which was undermined by the sea and collapsed in 1863. The wooden structure was put down on the edge of the river, and Captain Pete would live up there for a week on, a week off. Somebody else would take over for the other week, and then he would report to Preston that the ships would be coming up, so they would prepare the berths and yet, if it needed to, would arrange the tugs, you see, at the Preston end. The last boat to be launched out of the old boathouse, which we're sitting near now, was the Kate Walker in 1931.
Yeah.
We'd appreciate, when you look at this marshland, as you just remarked on, all now covered in grass. In the old days, it was sand with a slipway down into the water, perhaps about 200 yards long. And the boats would be pulled right down to low water, because this was Lytham Pool, and of course was all the boats that came in, mostly schooners in the very old days. I'm talking about the early 1800s. They would lie here and transfer the cargoes onto barges to go up to Preston.
How did you actually progress through from being crewman to becoming coxswain?
Oh, I was second coxswain when Harold made coxswain, when little Joe retired. It was really between me and Harold, who were coxswain at the time. Me being so young, like, it was only really for him to have the job, because, like, in them days, he used to vote with the crew, you know. Yeah. They always used to, but that, I mean, they've gone now. But that's how they used to do. They used to vote between, even on the launches, you know. It was up to them, you know, because there was a rule, they always took one out that was already in the crew, you see, but like, things are different now, but that's how they used to vote, you know. It was always left to, they used to have a big meeting and vote. And anyway, me being second coxswain, like, up all, you know, that time, so when it comes as I'll retiring, you more or less automatically go coxswain, you know. So then they'll vote for second coxswain. You know, that's how it's
just a steady progression.
Well, that's how they used to do, you know. They used to always vote. You see, the beauty of it was you already had a vote yourself if you was in. And there only used to be 8 in a crew, like, so you only like needed to. Of course, Lytham, we don't change coxswain now. Some stations they change them pretty often, but we never have done here, like, have we? They never done a lot of changing, swapping and changing at Lytham, you know. And then another job when we went was Pete's Lighter Fire. We took fire engine men down, you know, tender. We took a tender and firemen down. A hell of a blaze, you know.
Well, that was a boat.
Well, no, it was a light. What we call Pete's Light. It used to be called. It was like a monument, you know. It had been there for years, you know, and it's still there. Well, no, it's took down altogether now, isn't it? So we took the firemen down in the boat for that because he wanted to save the piles. Like, there was no way. It was like a big hut on the top, you know. Marines was in it in wartime, and you know, for anything going on in the river. And that was a big job, like, at the time, taking firemen down. But it couldn't save the building, like, but that was another job that was exciting, like. And it suited the firemen. I don't think we've ever took them since or before. You know, we had about 8 firemen and tender and everything in boarding boat, big boarding boat, you know. Firemen really enjoyed it, like, because there was plenty of water to go out, you know, but there was no way they could put it out when we got there, because it was, like, well ablaze, you know, but they only wanted to save the piles, you know, because it was a navigation mark for the river, you see. So that was that.
See on your wall that you have a vellum from the RNLI that commending a bronze medal that you won back in 1981. So would you like to tell me what that was about?
Well, that was a funny do that day. Like, we having what we call a lifeboat day, you know, and luckily for us, when we got that call out, we was already on the lifeboat, you know, when we got the call. Just about ready to come ashore, and somebody said there's a call out. Anyway, when we got there, it was very rough passage to getting there. Like, when we got there, it just going over. We actually saw the boat capsize, you know. And then he said he's gone, and it must have been, well, what seemed like must have been 2 minutes, and sail come up again, like. So I carried on, and to our amazement, when we got there, the rounds up. It only had one person aboard. He was in the water, fouled up in his lifeline, being dragged by the boat. Like, he could neither get in nor get out, you know. So we really, like, just got there in time. Like, I'd say another 10 minutes and he'd have been drowned, you know. He'd have gone under, definitely. And that's how we come to get the medal. There was, I got one, and Brian Pearson, and Robert Kennedy got Bellum, that's right. But by God, he deserved it too. You know, that day it was very bad, and we finished up with a line round the propeller, but made it, you know, manoeuvring worse than ever. I thought, well, it was either, you know, we had to get him that time, or else by the time we'd would have been ashore with him.
So the picture you've given is that he's caught in the rigging, attached to his own boat. Right. So how did you actually free him?
Well, they had to cut the lines. First of all, one at Lifeboat man shouted for accident, anyway, lost that, but eventually they had to cut the rigging to get him in the boat.
But that was from the lifeboat?
They had to get him in his own boat first, and then off his own boat.
So somebody had to transfer to his yacht?
Well, the two lifeboatmen got onto his yacht, you know, and they was trying to get him in, and we backed away, and one lifeboatman was still on, with Robert, you know, and then he got him back onto the boat, and then we went in again to pick the two up, like. I say, if we'd have missed him then, we would have never been able to get back to him, because we got line round propeller and it was bad to manoeuvre, you see. So we had to more or less get him, and in doing so, when we did, like, it damaged the boat more than what the boat went down. Just as we got them, the boat went down. We just, you know, as we pulled away, it went down, like, you know. But he come down next day I think it was next day, to thank us all and that, you know, which was very nice. I think he appreciated it, you know. He did, he really appreciated it.
You've seen an awful lot of change in the way the service operates through.
Oh, lot big change now. Like you say, everything's high tech now, isn't it? Like I mean to say.
How would you describe it before then?
Well, before I think what used to happen more or less, I'm saying at Lytham, it was having the local knowledge that was the main job. Being a fisherman, that's half your battle, innit? Knowing to be coxswain at boat, I think that's half your job. But like today, that they don't seem to work that way. But in them days, it was easier. You say, well, he knows where he's going, like, doesn't he? At river, like you say, now what they've got now, they've got all this radar. There was no such thing as radar, and that when it just come in. It come in when I was in. It wasn't in when I joined. We hadn't radar out like that, But now, like it's all. I mean, that they know where they are to a yard or two now, don't they? With a radar and that, you see. But before, I mean, you was looking up, taking marks offshore and things like that. That's how you were doing your navigating. When I joined.
I'm a communications specialist. Work with computers. That side of things didn't really bother me. In fact, it was something I was able to get my teeth into right away, in spite of the fact of not being a seaman. I'm still not a seaman, just part of a team. That's the changing face of lifeboats, I suppose. It's not now so vital to be a seaman. Other things are just as important. First aid, radar, navigation, and being able to work within a team. Also, at the time I was interviewed, our present coxswain had just come back from the Merchant Navy as a master, and his brother also had his master's ticket, and we all started together. I'm not sure if we attracted each other. Birds of a feather flocked together. But one by one, the older, wiser members knew the river better than I know some of the back streets in Lytham. Were getting old, and one by one retired, and we now have a relatively very young crew. I'm 34, I think the coxswain's maybe 33, maybe the average age is 35, and it's the changing face of lifeboats.
Had the old crew, had it been in families and fishing and things like that?
It had very much been in families. The old coxswain, Arthur Wignall.
His grandfather, John Robert Wignall, was coxswain between 1928 and 1939. And Arthur's son,
Russell, is still part of the crew. He's a traditional fisherman, and he's one of those that are very much needed on the boat for local work. When the boat is now it's now able to operate 50 miles offshore, so the local knowledge isn't as necessary all the time. It's no longer as important to have a boat full of people who know the river backwards, because very often we're not in the river. We have to rely on modern navigation equipment, Decker, radar, etc., which maybe some of the older guys didn't need to use in their day, and it's something which is becoming more and more important. Yeah.
So were you on station when the client came in for evaluation?
I was, in fact, partly because of my job at that time. I was able to turn up for all the exercises. I was very fortunate enough to be picked quite unexpectedly to actually go down to Poole, not only to take part in the training course, but also to be part of the crew that brought it back. And I'll never forget the experiences there, the hard physical work and the mental exhaustion on the final 18-hour passage when we set sail from St Mary's in the Scilly Isles to Rosslare to refuel at 9 o'clock, and then onwards with an hour's break to the Isle of Man. And on the way, it was our final test, if you like, and everything that could go wrong was meant to go wrong. We had the fire alarm, we had the man overboard, we had the engine failing, and it was a very, very exhausting night. In fact, when we moored up, I checked the galley, and I attempted to turn off the stopcock, which we have a small sink, make cups of tea out and wash up, and made sure all the cups were washed up before we left the boat, and I couldn't even remember which way to turn off the stopcock. I've since learnt that turn the cock off clock, or turn the clock off cock, is the way I remember clockwise for off for a stopcock. We had a good time, we enjoyed it, and the last day was a strange one. We piled into this guest house for breakfast, and we were absolutely exhausted. We'd been up for the best part of 18 hours. We'd physically and mentally drained, absolutely exhausted, and exhilarated because we knew it was just the last night. And I was rather surprised to see the engineer, the district engineer, and the district inspector order Guinness with the cornflakes. Well, I knew there must be a very good reason for this, so I ordered Guinness as well, and I think that must be the nicest pint of Guinness I've ever had. Absolutely superb. But I remember those times. I was very, very fortunate to be asked to go and crew, and to learn so much about the Tyne straight away at first hand, and that's something I remember for a long time.
And we're homeward bound, and carry us home, home, home from the sea. Angels of mercy, answer our plea, and carry us home, home, home from the sea. Carry us safely home from the sea. Home, home. Answer our plea, and carry us home.